Hello everyone, in this video I want to follow a request that is already 2 days old or 1 day, or anyway I didn't get around to it immediately because of the preparation for the SpaceX event, but now I'm finally getting around to it. Mickey Bill asked, please do make a video about the Soyuz engines. I've never heard of engines with multiple bells before, because I briefly mentioned the multi-nozzle engines of the Soyuz in my video about the ITS and basic optimization. And well, essentially the basics, the Soyuz engines have several nozzles in one engine for different reasons, for multiple reasons. Of course, you have to keep in mind the Soyuz is a somewhat old design. It has been improved and modified many times. It's, of course, highly modernized in its systems, and also the overall design has gone through a few changes. But fundamentally, it's still a direct successor of the Vostok, the original Vostok that launched the first human into space, that launched the first animal into space, that launched the first satellite into space. So it's cool, but it's also old, and that is actually a part of the reason. Now, for the basic facts, the Soyuz and its launch and its first and second stage boosters and core, however you want to call it, is powered by RD-107 and RD-108 engines, which are very similar. They only have one slight difference. They are both very similar turbopump designs, very similar engines designs, burn the same fuel, have almost identical thrust and efficiency, and the both have 4 main nozzles that produce the most part of the thrust, but both also have little extra nozzles that are smaller and don't provide as much thrust or efficiency, but they provide finer control. They are also they can be gimbaled to actually provide the attitude control for the rocket during the launch. Now the RD-107 has 2 of these, and the RD-108 has 4 of these. This correlates to the positioning of the engines. The RD-108 is in the core state, that is basically the center at liftoff, and the RD-107 is in the boosters. And the RD-108, with its 4 little extra chambers, Verniers as they're also commonly called. That's not a type-specific name, that's generally a name given to small extra engines or small extra nozzles that are added to big rocket engines or big rocket systems for finer control. And by gimbaling these 4 little control engines, the RD-108 pretty much has attitude control around all 3 axes, and by separately controlling these engines, the RD-108 pretty much has all the axes it needs for stable ascent of the Soyuz. And the RD-107, which is in the boosters, one RD-107 only really has attitude control around 1.5 axes, you might say. 2 axes, the 2 Vernier nozzles can kind of create a pitch or a roll movement, but there's also additional vectors in this, so on its own the RD-107 cannot really be stably controlled, but strapping 4 of these together you actually can have full attitude control over all three axes, and that's basically what happens because the Soyuz has four boosters, four RD-107 engines in 90 degrees, so those get full attitude control, and the core stage, of course, is also running from the start. But the verniers of the RD-107 still provide extra control to keep that big rocket on course. So adding the four main thrust nozzles, that means the RD-107 has 6 nozzles and the RD-108 has 8 nozzles. Otherwise, they're very similar. The RD-107 has a little bit more thrust and a little bit more efficiency. The RD-107 is a little bit better optimized for atmospheric pressure at ground level, and the RD-108 is a little bit better optimized for high altitude or vacuum pressure. That makes sense because the RD-107 has a shorter burn time. It's pretty much only for the lower atmosphere, while the RD-108 goes much higher up. They both burn RP1 and liquid oxygen, which is essentially a kerosene-based fuel. They have a medium efficiency of about 300 seconds ISP and kind of good thrust-weight ratio. In both cases, also the main technology, the turbo pump, the regulation system is shared, and then it splits up into 6 or 8 little combustion chambers with little nozzles, which gives you the structural and gas dynamical advantages of many small engines, while keeping the engineering and the plumbing to few big engines. The Vernier design is still kind of a leftover of its old age, even though there are newer versions now, simply because back in the Vostok era they didn't really have the technology to precisely control a huge rocket engine or gimbal it, so for control they had to add these smaller nozzles. You can see something similar in early American rockets, like the first Atlas rockets. They too had small additional engines to the main thrust providers. They had small additional engines for better control. And while they've gone through many versions and modernizations now, the main design is still pretty much the same, and they're quite reliable. Anyway, this might clear up the common confusion that the Soyuz rocket lifts off with 5 engines running, even though it looks like it lifts off with 20 engines running, because there are 20 big nozzles that you can see, and if you look closely, you even see 12 more nozzles of the Vernier engines, of the Vernier nozzles, and thus it looks like the Soyuz is lifting off with a whole lot of engines while it's actually only 5 engines. And of course, if there are still any open questions, you can still ask me. You can still ask me any questions or requests for further videos. Anyway, I hope this was a kind of interesting little look at the Soyuz main engines, and thanks for watching.